that's the general idea about why evolution, or just saying that these things are identical, won't solve that. Okay, so that was one example of harmony. So again, harmony, psychophysical harmonies, some these distinctive, striking, or fortuitous correlations between phenomenal states and their the other states that they correlate with, whether they be phenomenal or non-phenomenal states. So here we have one such correlation. So that correlation is, okay, distress gives you a reason to do something, and then the physical correlate of distress really disposes you to do this thing. Okay, another example, and so this is an example of something we can call normative harmony. So normative harmony, because here it has to do with something prudential normativity. Like the felt badness of distress gives you a reason to do something, and you really end up doing this. Okay, another case of psychophysical harmony, so another interesting correlation is something like this. Let's say you see a red apple. So that's the visual experience you have. And then you have, so that visual experience, let's say, has a neural correlate. And one of the things that neural correlate enables you to do is to say something like this. Seeing a red apple is more like seeing a blood orange rather than like seeing a green pear. Okay, and so what you're doing there is you're making a verbal report of a certain similarity relation obtaining between some of your experiences. And as it turns out, those experiences really do stand in that sort of relation. So it really is the case that the visual experience of seeing a red apple is more like that of seeing a blood orange. Okay, so here, rather than talking about normativity and some kind of like normatively fitting correlation, we're talking about something like a semantically fitting correlation, right? So on the one hand, we have the phenomenal side, and on the other hand, we have the physical side, which enables you to make a certain verbal report, and that verbal report ends up being true. Okay, so that's called semantic harmony. So those are just two examples. There are other ones we can go into, but those should be illustrative for what I have in mind more generally. And okay, the same reasons why evolution or identity theory in its standard form won't be helpful in the distress case won't also apply here. So that's why it won't help in the semantic case. Okay, so that's roughly the piece of data. I tried illustrating with two examples, and again, there are others. And so then the point is, okay, so I say that this piece of data is more expected on value selection hypotheses than something unguided naturalism. Okay, why do I say that? Okay, well, first of all, it seems like on unguided naturalism, these sorts of correlations are like really surprising. So first of all, on unguided naturalism, typically normativity and semantic properties, so normative properties and semantic properties won't be present at the fundamental level. So these are emergent properties that show up in maybe how we want to describe the world, but fundamentally the universe doesn't, make these sorts of distinctions. Okay, but here they do show up. So these semantic and normative properties do consistently and very systematically mark these correlations. So that's the first idea of why that is surprising. And then the second idea is just that basically the amount of ways that you could fail to get harmony seems to be much, much more numerous than the ways that you could get disharmony. And on unguided naturalism, nothing will push you towards the harmonious arrangements over the non-harmonious arrangements. So, like, consider this like case of psychophysical correlations. let's say that all experiences that happen are just experiences of like a buzzing noise, and that buzzing noise is proportional in intensity to, let's say, the mass of the information processing system, or it's proportional to the phi of the system. So if you know, like the IIT, that's like a measure from that theory. So here, let's say that phi just produces this, buzzing noise conscious experience. Okay, well, if you had these kinds of psychophysical laws, that, like, in a way, it seems like those laws would be simpler. Like you're just saying there's one thing rather than this whole host of different correlations. And once you get these kinds of really simple psychophysical laws, then actually you just get nothing like harmony. You don't get normative harmony. You don't get semantic harmony. Okay, so that's like how it's looking on the unguided naturalism side. Like it seems like you're pretty unlikely to get harmony. Okay, on the value selection hypotheses, seems like it's not that hard to get harmony. So on the most standard value selection hypotheses, a hypothesis being theism, it seems like God, at least plausibly, would have like a decent reason to give us these harmonious correlations, so that, for example, we can, kind of meaningfully interact with the world. Right? Like God's purpose for us is something like to be conscious agents in a world with which we can interact, learn about it, interact with each other. And, uh, if there is just nothing like harmony, and all of our experiences are, let's say, like in this buzzing noise case example, okay, well, it seems like the world ends up just being bereft of value and the sorts of values that God might want to realize. Okay, and then the same point goes to something like aesthetic deism. It seems like, our experiences being harmonious is pretty plausible, like a pretty plausible goal for somebody wanting to realize an aesthetically pleasing universe. Whereas a universe where, like, I don't know, we just constantly see darkness or constantly hear some like buzzing noise, those would be relatively less aesthetically valuable. Okay, so maybe these don't straightforwardly predict or entail it. Maybe they don't make it super likely, but it's still much more likely than on unguided naturalism. And so, to that extent, it confirms to a fairly strong degree value selection hypotheses, including theism over unguided naturalism. Okay, so I think that's it for me. I don't know if I should add something, but maybe you can go from here.
Okay, awesome. So, as Sasha's presentation, I would like to open the floor to questions. I do have some questions. I am interested to see if the audience has questions before I start giving mine. Like Sully or anybody down there if they want to come speak.
You can go first.
Okay. All right. So I just have some. I don't want to organize this like a debate or anything because I felt like that last time that was kind of ridiculous how that went. But I was going to ask a couple questions, I guess. So I guess if someone says distress is just a brain state, I think you covered some of that. But how do you respond to the fact that like it still seems like the two could come apart?
Right. So, like standardly, there's this distinction between something like, so okay, so the view you're talking about is something like, I don't know, identity theory or functionalism, but just physicalism, on which, okay, brain states and phenomenal states or conscious states, those are just the same. Okay, so those kinds of views are typically divided into two varieties. So one variety is type A physicalism and the other is type B physicalism. And what distinguishes these two is basically what they say on the question of the relation between the physical and the conscious. So type A will just say, type A physicalists will just say that brain states and conscious states are identical, and in fact they're identical in the same way that something like bachelors and unmarried men are identical. So that connection between one and the other is just derivable a priori. Like if you were smart enough, you'd just be able to figure out that, okay, once you arrange these neurons that way, that's the experience you'll get. So that's the type A view. But then the type B physicalist says, okay, no, that's not how that works. Actually, it's if you're just locked away in a dark room and you're imagining different configurations of neurons, you couldn't figure out what experiences those would generate. And these really are just like things that we have to learn a posteriori, like in the world. Okay, so the argument is targeting. It is basically admitted that for type A physicalists, so somebody who just thinks that these are the same and one is derivable from the other, the argument won't have any force. But again, type B is the more popular one. Okay, so how does this have force with the type B physicalist who says these are identical, but there is an epistemic gap? Well, I think the idea is just that if there is an epistemic gap, then these alternative scenarios where I'm saying, this harmony would obtain are like legitimate possibilities, epistemically speaking, right? They're legitimate epistemic possibilities. And it seems like for explanatory projects, that's really all you would want. So, I mean, consider something like necessitarianism, the view that every fact that obtains with metaphysical necessity. Okay, so you might have that view. You might think, okay, the world is as it is, and it had to be exactly this way, down to every detail. Okay, well, so maybe that's how it in fact is, but still, it seems like you can imagine it being different ways, and that can give legitimacy to your explanatory projects. And if you were this kind of person and you're playing poker with me, and I'm just dealing myself a royal flush every round, I think you might still think, okay, well, it's more likely that you're cheating than that you're legitimately getting these. Even though whatever turns out to be the case had to be the case on your view. And the reason is just I think that often what we're doing is going with something like an epistemic notion of probability. I mean, does that help you?
Yeah, I think that's. I think you are talking about the role of epistemic possibility in explanatory legitimacy, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if I were to follow up, if like explanatory projects gain legitimacy from like our ability to, like you said, like conceive of alternative scenarios, like imagining a world where brain states don't produce distress, for instance, then would you not say the epistemic gap between physical and phenomenal states give us genuine alternative possibilities that should be treated as like what's the word for this? Like not merely illusions. Like if
Well,
so, I guess
they're legitimate epistemic possibilities.
yeah,
I'm granting that maybe you think they're not epistemic possibilities, but I'm saying even if I'm granting that you might think that maybe they aren't metaphysical possibilities. So that's fine, right? But just even if they're not metaphysical possibilities, you might still have something like, a surprising feature of the world, even if you think it's metaphysically necessary. And that might still be something you might want an explanation for.
yeah,
Could I ask a question really quick?
yeah. Go ahead.
Is that okay, Sasha?
Yeah, it's fine. It's AMA.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure there was a good time to jump in. Somebody had asked in the chat about the definition, so I posted some sections in the paper. So on normative harmony, they say in every case, the psychophysical laws correlate a physical functional state with a distinct conscious experience, whose essential normative role in providing reasons is harmonious with the causal role of T in generating verbal and other responses. So I wonder if I don't know that they really need to make the claim this strong to run the argument. You know, like I think maybe in the great majority of cases, the vast majority of cases might still be strong enough. Um, but if the claim is every case, like, do you think there are some? I think we've talked about like drug addiction and so forth. So obviously, there's one way of looking at the drug addiction case where it's pleasurable, and so they seek it. But there's another way of looking at it where it's like they're also cognizant of the fact that it on net results in more suffering for them, let's say, or negatively balanced phenomenology, and that they still seek that out.
I think that there are cases of disharmony and normative harmony in specific. And I look at this part of the paper to see if so I think the older might be sort of restricted, but let's see. I mean, if it says old, then yeah, I would disagree or think that that's some like slip up on their part. Because I mean, I don't even think that they think it's all cases. Let's see.
Yeah, I think it's beginning. I think it's section 2.2.
What'd you say, Sully? I think you broke up.
Oh, I said section 2.2.
No, but sorry, if you look at here they're quoting somebody else's definition. So what the section says is, many examples of psychophysical harmony are cases of what Adam Pouts calls normative harmony, which he defines as follows. And then it does have this in every case. But I mean, I'm not really I mean, maybe that is something they should have qualified it.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, another question for you. I've heard some people try to respond by saying disharmony is not an epistemic possibility because it conflicts with some analysis of agency or something like that. And we like background that we're agents or something. What do you think of that?
Well, I sort of wonder why we couldn't bracket that out of our background. Like, clearly we do want to bracket some stuff out, like harmony, but also maybe like something like, like some things that just like are so close to harmony that they entail it. So it's like if you come up with some philosophical view, as somebody who's very aware of harmony, and so that view is like deeply rooted in the fact of us having harmony. I'm not sure if we really should be keeping that in the background for the likelihood comparison.
Yeah, that's fair. I think maybe what they want to say is that when you're doing this a priori epistemic reasoning about maybe conceptual truths or something like that, that like, you are just like sort of acting as an agent in that sort of a priori reasoning process. But I think that even if you want to go for something like that and say like the analysis of agency rules out disharmony as an epistemic possibility, it seems like, okay, fine, they just wouldn't be agents on that analysis, like who cares kind of thing. But
Right. I mean, I'm not really. I know Mason had an objection like that. I think I asked him about it, but he didn't reply to me.
yeah.
I guess something I want to ask, maybe on the idea of like value selection hypothesis, like, could this kind of harmony be taken as like a form of, I think you are a theist, but like Bayesian confirmation for like theism or
yeah. I think it's like very similar to something like the fine tuning argument. Because
what
I
about
mean, sorry, what?
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I think this argument is like very similar to the fine-tuning argument, and the way it was originally presented in the paper, which kind of introduced this as an argument for theism. They run it as a kind of a Bayesian argument. That's right. I mean, you could run it in some different way. Maybe you could frame it abductively or something. Not sure if that makes all that much difference, but yeah, it's definitely like all the ways that you can formulate the design argument, I think, would work here.
Yeah, I guess that's exactly right. I was thinking of also like aesthetic teleology in a way. Also when I was coming across this.
Yeah, I think that I know some teleological view is definitely counted among the value selection hypotheses that they mention in the paper.
Yeah,
Yeah, also
think-
axiarchy. So like if you just think value is like fundamental or something like that, they say that that's probably okay.
Oh, I didn't realize I was already honest in chat. I didn't. I thought it was Venus because they actually have similar profile pictures. I apologize. Anyways, I guess if to try and engage on the Bayesian side of things, if these normative and like semantic harmony, as you said, like if it in our conscious experience is like much more probable under theism or as I was kind of mentioning aesthetic teleology than under unguided naturalism. Do you think that this counts like as a genuine like do you think it counts as like Bayesian evidence in a way supporting those views or like
Yeah, I mean there are like other concerns, but like the way I'm presenting it here, yeah, that would be the point of the argument. It's like
okay.
It's a piece of data that's has like a positive evidential impact on, let's say, theism and these other similar hypotheses relative to its competitors. So it's Bayesian evidence in that sense.
A lot of people's original contest whenever they come across this argument that they want to appeal to they want to say things like isn't it possible what we call harmony is just a projection of cognitive biases that evolve or something like that, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I can try to come up with another question. I guess even if normative and semantic harmony like are surprising to us, why do we assume they reflect a like a theistic principle, for instance, rather than just being like brute features in a way, in kind of like a metaphysically necessary structure of things? So like I guess why infer design or selection instead of just saying
Right.
and this
So,
may have been answered, but
I mean, my thought is just it's not really like I'm inferring one or the other, right? I'm like, so that's like a further step, just discussing, okay, once we have this on the table and all the other stuff, what's overall more likely? Here, all I'm really saying is just that, okay, take this piece of data, this theory does better to accommodate it than this other theory. So of course, somebody is free to just say, okay, I really like my naturalism, so I'm still not going to accept any sort of design explanation. I'm going to go with some bruteness explanation. Okay. Okay, fair enough. But the argument never said that you couldn't do it. It just said that this piece of data works to confirm theism and similar hypotheses over naturalism. It's like I mean, I think for like any hypothesis, if like you have like a really, really, really low prior probability assessment in that theory, so basically before you even come to the table to look at the evidence, you just think that theory is like so insanely unlikely. Okay, then like you might think even though this is really good evidence for this theory, that still just doesn't overcome your initial skepticism, and that's fine.
And I think it's interesting because in a way, the argument kind of goes off of a lot of people's, for instance, like they're even atheists, I think will agree, like the staunchest of atheists will agree that they're kind of shocked by complexity of things.
Yeah.
And that this argument can kind of appeal to people who are who have experienced that, in a way that's not necessarily like it's kind of just more so from what I'm understanding. It's not necessarily like it's that it confirming theism more than it's trying to confirm that unguided naturalism just is under this theory not the case.
Well, it's just it's basically just let's say you had some probability estimate for unguided naturalism and for like theism and similar hypotheses. Okay, well, once I put this argument on the table, all I'm saying is just rationally you should decrease your probability assignment to unguided naturalism and increase it in theism and other value selection hypotheses. And whatever the probability estimation ends up being at the end, I'm okay with that, right? I'm just saying that it increases theism relative to unguided naturalism, and yeah.
Franks, you had a question. I'm sorry, I kind of talked over you for a bit there.
Yeah, real quick. Sasha, so in the debate with T-Jump, and there's a 3-part question, so I'll just try to be quick about it. So he said that you were just like imagining this harmony, and he also said that you didn't have an empirical basis for it. So my question is, do you think that the question is even relevant to say whether there's an empirical basis for it, or is the question confused? And also, I know you're an atheist, so my third question would be, what are some of the defeaters that you would have for the psychophysical harmony?
Right. Okay. So I'll start with the last one. I mean, I don't know if I would consider myself an atheist, maybe more like an agnostic, and that's a recent shift. So a lot of people, like I used to be an atheist, like more strongly a few months back. But I mean, like the total assessment of just like, okay, fine tuning, psychophysical harmony, all of that stuff versus evil, I'm not sure about. Maybe I would have to think more about it. But like, just the reason why I'm leaning more towards agnosticism is because I have some more general doubts about this whole approach to figuring out the world. Like, like the idea seems to be something like, okay, we want to come up with these Bayesian arguments. And some people think that, like, okay, this is what a lot of scientists do, maybe implicitly rather than explicitly, but like, this is kind of like a mirror of this abductive scientific methodology. This is why it's legitimate. That seems like really contentious to me. Like, is it really the case that we can like, first of all, is it really like how scientific theorizing works and how theorizing justification work? That seems like a really complicated question to like, you'd have to look a lot at the history of science to figure that out. And then second, just is the case of this like philosophical theorizing about these sorts of matters relevantly similar to the successes of the sciences? So those are the kind of like worries I have. Okay, so that was the third question. The second question I think was just, okay, is there like some legitimacy to the request for an empirical basis for this kind of stuff? But then I think another one was just like, I think like, what do I think about this idea that this is just like an imagined correlation, like just something like we're coming up with rather than something really in the world? Is that right?
Correct, Sasha. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, the first question, okay, why do I think that this is like a legitimate correlation? Okay, I mean, I guess I So I mean, there's like complications here, but just the correlations are described in terms of certain properties. So let's think of like which properties are invoked in the description of harmony. Okay, so it's like we're invoking, first of all, like properties of consciousness, right? And second, the properties of, I don't know, like physical systems, like brains. I don't know, maybe like neurophysical, neurobiological, neurochemical properties. Okay, clearly those two sets of properties are not just like random, imaginary, arbitrary things. Those are just like things that like scientists and like, for example, cognitive science, psychology, uh, that's just their like whole domain. So okay, these properties are not just something I'm like randomly coming up with. Okay, so then what about semantic properties or normative properties? Are these just things that we're coming up with? I mean, maybe you could take that view, right? Maybe you could think, and so let's treat them separately. Okay, so how plausible is it that like normative properties are just like completely made up? I mean, I don't know. Maybe like there's some appeal to that for like aesthetic normativity and moral normativity. For like epistemic normativity and for prudential normativity, I'm sort of doubtful. Like here is something that seems like this something like this probably has to be right, which is just okay, the conscious experience of distress or of suffering in some way gives you like a reason to avoid whatever's causing that. And that can be like phrased in pretty like deflationary Humean terms, let's say, of just like, okay, that's what prudence dictates. And like that seems like it's a pretty modest commitment. Like I really doubt like a lot of people wouldn't be on board with that. And that already lets us state a like significant class of harmonies. But maybe like, yeah, if you're a normative anti-realist, like just across the board, then I guess normative harmony is not something you have to worry about. I mean, on the other hand, I don't think T-Jump is like a complete normative error theorist, right? Like he is a moral realist of some sort. I mean, he has some like weird views there, but he does talk about things like actions being justified and so on. So I don't imagine he's like completely of that idea. And then more generally, I think like a lot of people think that there is something like normativity, even if it's not like really robust, right? Like philosophers, according to like the Phil survey, will acknowledge normativity in one form or another as a real feature of the world. And then it's like, even if you're like kind of unsure whether normativity is something legitimate and in the world, okay, well, like, if you're 50-50, then like if you take that uncertainty and start evaluating the argument that way, you still might come up with like a very strong argument in favor of theism, right? Because just what you're going to think is, okay, in case harmony is not a real feature of the world, then we get these correlations, and we could have got any other ones, and there wouldn't be anything cool or surprising about any of them. On the other hand, like, I'm also like 50% sure that normative features of the world are real. And then I get like a really good explanation of why this phenomenon turned out to be the way it is. Okay, and then for semantic properties, I mean, those are also something I think we like study pretty legitimately in like respected sciences, right? So like computer science, like artificial intelligence research, just linguistics generally, right? Like maybe these aren't fundamental properties, but certainly they're properties in terms of which we can frame useful scientific generalizations. So yeah, I think these are legitimate predicates to frame a scientific datum in terms of. Okay, and then on the question of is there like a legitimate demand here for something like empirical confirmation or predictive novelty? I mean, I don't really think so. I think like a lot of sciences seems to not really be about like doing testable novel predictions. That's like some idea T-Jump has. But like at the very least, seems like just within the practice of actual scientists, it's a lot more complicated. Actually, in preparing for the debate with T-Jump, I looked at his debate with Agamemnon, and there's something sort of interesting there because Agamemnon brings up this historian of science. I think his name is Thomas Brash, and he says that his work basically shows that in a lot of these like major scientific breakthroughs, scientists didn't really care about novelty. What they cared about is something like simplicity and other theoretical virtues. Novelty didn't really sway them that much. Okay, so T-Jump's response there is like, well, yeah, maybe that's what they think, but that doesn't matter, right? What matters is like what justified the scientists, not what they thought. So that's completely irrelevant. So that was his response to Agamemnon, bringing in that historical citation. It's like, I mean, maybe somebody could say that, right? Maybe you could say that, look, I have like this really, really good a priori argument for, predictive novelty being like essential to scientific practice. And it really has nothing to do with the actual practice of scientists. It's just this argument shows that this is how scientific practice has to proceed. And what actual scientists are doing doesn't matter. But like that's not what T-Jump does, right? Just like everybody disagrees with you. This is what all scientists think. And somebody confronts with actually seems like here's like a historian of the sciences who says, no, that's not what all scientists think. He says, yeah, well, it doesn't matter what the scientists think, right? So I don't know.
Just I guess curious to hear. Have you ever used this argument as an argument against like eliminativism or like strong functionalism? Maybe like you ever
No,
said
I
that
think
like
this. Yeah, sorry. So to be clear, the argument, if anything, could support those kinds of views, right? Because remember what I said about the type A, type B stuff. This argument purports to be effective against type B physicalists. So, like physicalists who acknowledge that there is an epistemic or explanatory gap, but they right out concede that just for type A physicalists, there won't be this argument won't apply. And so, just eliminativists about consciousness or like just very, very strong functionalists, to them, like the argument doesn't attack them. And actually, to the extent that, they want to attack their like physicalist competitors, they can actually utilize this argument. They can say, okay, just this argument makes it less likely that type B physicalism is true. So, okay, maybe that confirms theism, but it also confirms type A physicalism.
I thought you might I guess I thought you might say something like they might they like functionalism like can explain behavior, but not like why experience is structured in ways that are semantically and normatively aligned with meaning, I guess.
Right. So, like type B functionalism, I don't think has an explanation, but type A functionalism. So, functionalism would just says, okay, conscious states are functional states, and actually, this identity is like perfectly understandable. So, just if you were like just born in a dark room, didn't have access to anything, but had just like infinite brain power, you could actually figure out just, okay, if I put these like functional states together this way, here's what experience will be generated.
Okay, I see. So they say there's no I think you covered on this earlier, so I apologize if I'm just making you talk again. But they are saying like type A functionalists will say like there's not really an explanatory gap really, and
Right,
that yeah, okay, and that harmony is kind of reflective almost like how our linguistic practices I guess evolved.
right. Well, it's like Well, like if they think that it's just something derivable a priori, then it's like, okay, I mean, it's not really something that seems to confirm anything about theism or atheism, because really the correlations being what they are is sort of in the same vein as like mathematical truths being what they are. So it's just like, okay, there is like something we can figure out about mathematics, and we can ask for like mathematical explanations. And so you can say, okay, like why is 2 an even number? Well, it's because it's divisible by 2 without a remainder. Right, so that's why 2 is an even number. Okay, but that won't really make a difference to like any substantive theory about the way the world is. Right, so it's something that you might not know and you might have to figure out. But because it's something you can figure out completely a priori, it's not something that counts in favor of one or another hypothesis about the way the world is.
Okay.
And so the functionalist thinks that the brain consciousness identities are just like that. They're just like really hard to figure out.
If harmony between phenomenal experience and this sort of functional structure was something that was like truly a priori, then in my mind, we shouldn't find it surprising, like as surprising as we do, but we do. And that would suggest to me that we're not necessarily confronting a contingent pattern, or that we're confronting a contingent pattern, I guess, and not really a conceptual necessity to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, I think I get what you mean. I mean, just like some of these identities, some of these like a priori truths are like still very hard to figure out, though, right? So it's like think of like some complex mathematical theorem. It's just like, okay, Goldbach's like strong Goldbach's conjecture. Okay, like whether that's true or not, that's just like a priori. But we don't know it. We've tried really hard to figure it out. And so, maybe there's some room for analogy there for like an a priori physicalist or type A physicalist. And sorry, like another case is just like, okay, we think that like chemical objects, so I don't know, gold, right? Gold being the way it is just fully explicable in terms of the physical makeup of gold. So you have like, I don't know, let's say some like block of gold. Okay, why is it the way it is? Why does it have the chemical properties it does? Okay, well, we think that the answer to that question is fully provided by the physical properties of gold. So just if you could fully understand just the arrangement of the fundamental particles that make up the block of gold, then you could understand why it has to have the chemical properties that it does. But nonetheless, like we just have like nowhere, like we're nowhere close to being able to carry out that kind of derivation. They're just like actual models which involve like I don't know, like 20 particles, just like go way beyond our computational capacity at the moment and probably forever. So, there are some a priori identities that will be like really, really not obvious to us.
yeah. I guess to the analogy, I would think the persistent this like explanatory gap between brain states and phenomenal states. I guess it would talk about to me like a deeper kind of disconnect maybe than something like gold and its properties. Like this seems like it's something that's more like a principled limitation than just a one that's in practice to me, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I mean, I tend to agree. I think like just like generally philosophers seem to agree that just like, okay, there is definitely like a special kind of gap here that's distinct from all this other stuff, like gold and atoms or something, right? So I definitely agree.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to, I guess, keep asking questions until somebody has something else. If anybody, by the way, anybody can hop up at any point they want to.
Isn't Beowulf trying to? Sorry, I thought you had
I invited Beowulf because I thought he might have some really interesting questions, but I don't know if he's even able to speak right now. So,
no, I
so
thought he had his arm raised.
no, I raised his arm.
Yeah, the green means they're invited, and black and white means that they've requested.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I guess if like physical, well, you said type A, physicalist or physicalism. Like if those philosophers said there's a special kind of epistemic gap here, would that like tell you, hey, there's this like consciousness that kind of resists the kind of like this, like a reductive explanation we see in other fields like chemistry or biology.
Yeah, so type A are gonna say it's actually in principle the same, and the type B is gonna say, yeah, these are not those kinds of like the biology and like chemistry case. That's like fundamentally distinct from the consciousness brain case. And also,
Okay.
by the way, like I mean, we're coming around to like an hour, so it might be just a good time to end it if
Yeah, sure thing. If nobody else has any questions, I am going to just open the stage. Sasha, I appreciate you. We're going to try to up the what's the word I'm trying to say? Activity. It's such a small word for me to think of, but I'm trying to up the activity in the server so we can try and get more members. This is my first time doing this in a long time, guys. So I hope that I did not bore you. I hope that you had a good time talking here with everybody and maybe had some interesting questions, and hopefully you'll do it again in the future.
yeah, sure, if you want me to. I mean, I'm not like a professional philosopher, but yeah.
I got you. No, none of us are really. Thankfully, we don't just we don't abide to novel testable predictions in here, so we clear that hurdle, right?
Great. Okay, that's good.